What's up, hockey fans? This is episode 98 of the Clappercast. I'm Burke, and as always, joined by my co-host, Sean. Sean, it's been a lot of signings in free agency here. How's it going?
I've been sitting here listening to The Sound of Silence on repeat for the last week. Just hello, darkness, my old friend. I'm watching the Oilers this offseason, and it's just spiraling downwards for me.
Straight up not having a good time over there.
Not at all.
Yeah, that's fair. They're making some interesting moves for sure. Today's episode we're going to talk about the Atlantic Division and kind of where the teams are at so far in that division. But man, the Oilers. Well, when we get to them, you're going to have a real fun episode, I think.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to mentally prepare for the trauma of that episode.
Yeah, you'll have to get ready. Prepare yourself. It's coming. All right, well, I guess first up is the Boston Bruins. And I think they've kind of stayed roughly the same for me. There's some pretty notable people who have left the team. And they've kind of brought in some people who seem to be pretty much at the same level. Maybe, depends which guy you're looking at. But, I think one of the biggest thing that they've done so far is that they have re-signed Taylor Hall to a contract, so he's staying there for a 4-year, $6 million per season deal. So, he seemed to fit in pretty well with that team, and they wanted him back. So, I don't know, kind of nice to see him stay in a place and get that longer contract and see if he can, help take them to a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and he's basically slotted in as the second line left wing on that team. So to get him for $6 million per season, fairly reasonable. The hope is that on a better team with a better structure, better system, he'll actually fit in more and find more consistency in his play because he sort of struggled since that MVP winning season. So if he can stay in the lineup and find some chemistry with actually whoever else is on that second line, because they've lost David Krejci, who was centering that before. Mm-hmm. So it's probably going to be like Charlie Coyle or something bumping up.
Yeah, which is a noticeable decline for me. Losing Krejci for them is huge. He's a career Bruin.
Yeah.
Has been, I think he's one of the longest tenured Bruins, if not the most longest tenured, and he's been with the team for a long time, and I think his absence is going to be very noticeable. He had a really good season, and he's retiring from the NHL to go play back at home in the Czech Republic. So yeah, that hurts for sure.
Yep.
For that team. They brought in Nick Foligno, which was kind of an interesting.
That's a very Boston player, though.
Yeah, it is.
Between Foligno, Haula, and Noshik, those are kind of very Boston forwards, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think their bottom six might have improved a little bit, but that top six, I don't know if Charlie Coyle is going to be able to replace Krejci's center ability, and yeah, I don't know. I think their top 9 might be pretty good, but that top 6 might be on a bit of on the weekend. After that quote unquote perfection line, there's definitely a bit of a drop off, I think. But their power play should be pretty good, But and then Kevin Miller, he retired. They lost who was it? Lauzon in the expansion draft. They were able to re-sign Mike Riley, and they brought in Derek Forbort as well.
That seems like a lot for Forbort, but I think probably he'll get a decent shot on Boston's blue line. So I think that's probably going to end up working out okay if he can provide a bit more of a defensive presence that I think maybe they would need, because he's a huge shot blocker if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he's a big guy, physical guy. He signed that 3-year, $3 million contract. So, I think we talked about this near the end of the season, just about how Boston's defense was kind of on the small side. And, a lot of teams are doing this. We saw it with Seattle with their expansion, but their teams are going to go into that big D-man kind of
now
world.
that the bigger defenders have learned to skate and keep up with the pace of play, you're kind of seeing the resurgence of the size being a focus on the back end.
Yeah, Tampa Bay, big defense. Montreal, big defense. Dallas, when they were in the playoffs, big defense. Capitals, there's St. Louis, lots of big defensemen. So, teams are seeing that, that gets you far in playoffs and, perhaps a bit more resiliency and being able to absorb hits and stuff like that in playoff type hockey. And so, teams are kind of moving back towards that. So I kind of like that move for them, just bringing him in, adding that kind of stable, big kind of guy to balance out, the Matt Grzelcyk, kind of smaller type D-men. But, I do think they might still have a little bit of depth issues if any of their top 4 guys gets hurt.
But I think probably the biggest story for the Bruins this offseason is the fact that their entire goalies are completely turning over. Tuukka Rask is going to be out until at least January, I think, with recovering from surgery. So there isn't even a guarantee that he's going to return. And I don't think the team is too confident of that either because they signed Linus Ullmark to a 4-year, $5 million contract per season. So that's pretty telling that they don't think Rask is going to be a long-term fit there anymore. And, of course, Yaroslav Halak went over to Vancouver. So they're basically relying on Jeremy Swayman to take that backup role this season, potentially split it with Ullmark in the starter role if he continues how he played in Boston at the end of last year.
Yeah, it is a big storyline, and I think Rask will probably re-sign for maybe like a 1 or 2 year deal or something. But yeah, it's like depending on how his recovery goes, he might not be.
Yeah, because he's dealt with injuries and the one surgery he's having is on his hip, I think too. So that's a bit of a risky one for a goalie to know if he's going to be able to
affect his mobility.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll see, but. Yeah, like I said, it's kind of at the start of the segment here. I think that they kind of stayed about the same. I think that they probably won't win the division, but I think they're still a playoff team with the additions that they've made, and I think that they probably will be looking to get a center though, for sure. So I guess we'll move on to Buffalo Sabres, and the first thing I wanted to mention with them was the fact that they did lose Linus Ullmark, and it was very surprising because they didn't trade him at the end of last season, and they protected him in the expansion draft, and they didn't get a deal done, and I don't blame him for not wanting to play there. He had all things considered, a pretty good season, and you can't blame him for not wanting to be playing behind that D-line. So, they lost their starter. They had to bring in Craig Anderson and Aaron Dell, and you got to think that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and maybe even Dustin Tokarski are probably going to be getting a lot of opportunities there.
The plan for this has to be getting Pekka Luukkonen into the Sabres crease ASAP, because a tandem of a 40-year-old Craig Anderson that was apparently convinced to come back and play for another year, and Aaron Dell, who's kind of a career backup type guy who has never really stayed consistent with the team or in the lineup anywhere. Like, I get you're still rebuilding, but that's tank central right there.
Yeah, I saw some people commenting about, like, is it possible that Buffalo's even worse next season? Despite, having a god-awful season, like, they could legitimately be worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, they didn't add anything significant either. It was mostly re-signing or bringing in, depth players. And their first overall pick, I think Owen Power is going back to play university for another year.
Oh, yeah. So, they traded out Rasmus Ristolainen, brought in Robert Hagg. They still have to sign Rasmus Dahlin and Henry Jokiharju. They did bring in Will Butcher, who was kind of like the 7th kind of D-man in New Jersey. They traded out Sam Reinhart. It's tough to see this team as improving, for sure. Looking at their current signed defensemen, Colin Miller, Will Butcher, Robert Haig, Mark Pissick, who also plays forward, and was again that kind of seventh, eighth guy in Dallas last year. And then Jacob Bryson. And like I said, they have to re-sign Rasmus Dahlin and Henry Jokiharju. So that is not a great blue line at the moment. And they lost Ullmark, who kept them in games. So yeah, I don't know. And if they're gonna still be working on trading out Jack Eichel, the centerpiece to this team, man, there's some rumored trades in the works for Eichel, but the return is just not. It doesn't seem like it's good enough in any of the ones that I've seen.
No, the thing is, like I've mentioned this before, that you don't win these trades. When you're making a trade, you're giving away a franchise player like Jack Eichel. You are never going to win with what you get in return. Yeah, they're going to get a couple of prospects and a couple of draft picks out of it, but it's not going to replace the impact that Eichel has on the lineup in a game-to-game basis. And especially with the way the team seems to be handling it, and the way Eichel's party is, publicly kind of calling out the organization for, potentially mistreating him and his injury and the situation in general. Yeah, it's just tanking his value, I think. So, the Sabres wanted a couple of firsts, a prospect, and a solid NHL player or something. I don't think they're getting that anymore. With the amount of teams that have dropped out and that can't afford to even take on his $10 million.
Yeah, it's I don't know. They definitely have gotten worse, and the situation with Eichel has made it, has compounded the issue, and so they're going to be the bottom for sure in this division, in my opinion.
I don't think there's I guess Detroit's not great yet either, but
they'll be better than them.
Yeah, because looking at their roster, it's just they have nothing. They've got a whole bunch of random third and fourth liners who are going to be playing first line minutes.
Yeah, I mean, unless Dylan Cousins just sets the world on fire in his sophomore season,
500-point season, yeah,
and starts sniping with Jeff Skinner and Casey Middlestat. I don't know, man. I mean, strange things happen in sports all the time, but going into this season, there's no first line. There's not even a number 2 D-man on this team. Rasmus Dahlin had an absolutely god-awful season. What does his contract look like as an RFA? Casey Middlestat had a good second half of the season. What does his contract look like as an RFA? It's just the troubles are not over yet in Buffalo, and it's sad to say that, but it's really quite apparent just looking at their roster right now.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where it's just, you've been going through a rebuild for 10 plus seasons now, but it has to keep restarting every time they bring in new front office staff. And, they've just gotten their latest GM, and it's had to restart again, and they're going to be stuck for a little bit longer here getting over some of these bad contracts. Once they can kind of get Okposo, and, I mean, Skinner's, there's no way you're getting out of anywhere with Skinner's contract. No one's taking that. But if you can at least get Okposo $6 million off the books, then you can kind of start working down, bringing in actual players to fill these roster spots instead of whatever you can find from anywhere.
Yeah, and moving on to Detroit. They're a team that's has been a basement dweller, but they're definitely a much more positive story.
The Yzer plan is real, and you can actually see it working. You can logically work through what is happening in Detroit, and make it look like it's actually going to be good.
Yeah, for sure.
There's logic to the decisions.
You take a look at all the every contract length has been carefully, determined to expire at the same time as other players. It's like, you said this to me off of a show, but you mentioned it looks like they're kind of building to have a team come together in 2 seasons, and have all of their rookies and things come up. And yeah, you see it. You just look at their contracts, and it's all of the shitty ones are coming up, and there's a lot of great prospects that they have, and they've been drafting really well. They've been making good trades. They've been signing guys who were, not qualified, like Pio Suter from Chicago. I think that's a
That is a
snag
steal
for them.
I don't. What is Chicago like? Why did Chicago give up on him? He had an amazing season for the type of player he is on that organization.
Yeah, they needed the money for Seth Jones, I guess.
Apparently.
Yeah, like they started at like Yzerman's first move when he came to Detroit was to trade for Adam Ernie. Last year, Adam Ernie had a great year, so it made Yzerman look like he was smart. He had 20 points in 45 games, which is a career high pace for him. There was a time there, I think there was like a week or two where he was just scoring like all of his goals.
Yeah, because that was right at the end of the season because I picked him up in fantasy and he was putting up points constantly.
Yeah, so he had like a really good, second half. They traded out Mantha, got Jacob Vrana. Looks like a great fit for them. He's an RFA. They have both him and Ernie are RFAs. They have to sign, but they've got nothing but cap space. But the thing is that even though they have nothing but cap space, they're still making good deals. They're not overpaying, these guys. And then they just re-signed Tyler Bertuzzi to another 2 years, which is, good. Last year, I think he went to arbitration, and it was quite a brutal process, and he signed for the 1 year, so it's nice to see them, get a little bit more length on that.
Yeah, and Bertuzzi, too, I believe, was either in trade rumors or he was just general trade bait that it wasn't sure he was going to be coming back to the organization, so it's good for them to be able to get him back for another, hopefully, couple of seasons. Just to help give them some forward depth because he's been there for a while. It's nice to have a consistent presence in there.
Yeah, and they also got Nick Leddy, who can bring another veteran to their blue line. So they've got some solid older guys on the blue line to mentor some of the younger guys coming up. And I think that Moritz Seider should be making his rookie season debut, I guess, for the team this season. So that's exciting. They acquired Alex Nedeljkovic. Things are looking really positive for the Red Wings, and I don't think that they're going to be in playoffs this season, but it's looking like in probably like 2 years they will be, they're on a trajectory here.
Yeah, we see. I'm looking at their cap friendly page, and looking at when the contracts end, it really looks to me like that 2023-24 season is the first one that they're going to start going for it a bit. Because that's going to give them a couple more years to get some of the defenders that they're drafting really high right now, a chance to develop and break into the lineup. They just got, Sebastian Cossa in the last draft, and he's going to need a bit of time before he's NHL ready. They're hoping that Nedeljkovic is going to be able to handle the first wave of rising up in the ranks. But so that's kind of the point at which pretty much all of the current contracts they have expire after next season, after 2022-23. So heading into 23-24, you're probably going to see a huge overhaul on that roster with a lot of these prospects breaking into the lineup. They're probably going to go heavy on forwards in the next draft, and they're probably going to get a really good one because they're still going to have a high draft pick, I imagine. And you're going to see a lot of this turnover after the next 2 seasons, pardon me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Yzerman's not, one to rush everybody into the league, and that's kind of always been Detroit's way, is to just like put people in when they're ready. And Yzerman seems to be doing that as well here. And they've got Lucas Raymond, Joe Velino. They've got a lot of really good players or prospects that could be looking to make that jump here in the next few years, and it's really going to change the dynamic of their team. They're going to be young, and they're going to be fast, and they're going to be pretty good. And they're still kind of waiting for Zadina to have his breakout. It's been a little slow for him, so they're still trying to hope that he can do that and fill the pucks fill the nets of the teams that didn't draft him or whatever he said. But yeah, I mean they're looking. They've let a lot of bad contracts expire, and they just seem to be keep signing good ones.
Yeah.
And so for Detroit fans, you gotta love what Yzerman's doing, and to have that faith in your GM to just be like, that's a great move. We scooped up Pio Suter. That's awesome. We traded for Alex Nedeljkovic for Bernier and something like a third or whatever. That's a great move. That just seems like he's he's always winning, and he's kind of bringing that back to the Motor City. So
Yeah.
exciting for them for sure.
You already mentioned Nick Leddy being brought in, so he was kind of their biggest acquisition of the offseason for skaters anyways. Nedeljkovic is probably the best player, but it'll be interesting to see if Leddy can handle the expanded role he's going to get, because he's basically the best defender on that roster already, and I think he's going to be thrust into a role that's a little bit higher in the lineup than what he was playing in New York. In New York, he was kind of stuck behind or sandwiched in with Pelech and Pulak, but Detroit is probably going to be their main guy. Between him, I don't think DeKeyser's as good as they had hoped, but it's basically going to be Nick Leddy's defense right now. So it'll be interesting to see if he can kind of thrive in that role, or if it's going to be a bit difficult for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they're still going to not be like the hardest team to play against this season, and they're probably going to add a few more players here, but they're not going to be top of the league unless, again, there's something super surprising that happens and the team just has like unreal chemistry or something. But they're still going to be a bit better, I think. Like they're not going to be on Buffalo's level for sure. So they're trending up for sure. And then moving on, I guess, to the next team here alphabetically is the Florida Panthers. And for them, I think they're probably about the same. In my opinion, I mean they lost a few players here. Alex Wenberg signed with Seattle, and they lost obviously their goalie. What's his name? In the expansion draft. Dreger in the expansion draft. But they've also got Spencer Knight, who made his debut last season. Played in playoffs, looked really good. He can serve a backup. Bobrovsky makes enough money that they should be able to have a cheap backup for him. So if Bobrovsky can kind of play like he should and like he's paid to do, that'll work out. And then Ekblad's coming back from injury, so they get their number one D man back. They re-signed Montour and Gus Forsling. So yeah, I think like their blue line looks okay.
Yeah,
there might be some depth issues if some of those guys get hurt again, but maybe they'll sign some more depth guys. And then on forward, I mean,
it's basically
I think they're
the same.
they look the same. They paid a bit of money for Sam Bennett.
I'm a bit unsure on that contract. They're giving him a lot of money for, what was it, 150 minutes of ice time in his trial run over there at the end of last year.
Yeah.
So he's going to be making $4.425 million for the next 4 seasons now. And he had a good 10-game stretch. So that's a bit of a risk. They must see something in Bennett that maybe we don't. But for someone who's kind of got a history of being a bit stagnant from his time in Calgary, we'll see if he can actually respond and thrive. Because 15 points in 10 games through the regular season for Bennett in Florida, but he had 12 and 38 in Calgary before that. So he's obviously he gets way more ice time in Florida than he did in Calgary, and that's part of it is that he's been given a bigger role. So they're paying him for the role they're giving him. So hopefully he can live up to it.
Yeah, but then they brought in Sam Reinhart, so it's like, okay, so is he going to have that same level of ice time? They still have to sign Sam Reinhart, so they traded for him from Buffalo. But, if Reinhart is, coming into that lineup, do they play together? Do they not play together? I'm curious as to what their lines are going to look like, because they had Wenberg leave. So does Reinhart play, where he was, or
I'd say so.
Else?
So, I'm looking at Cap Friendly's depth chart, and it looks fairly reasonable where they have Verhaeghe, Barkov, and Duclair on the first line, Huberdeau, Bennett, and Reinhart on the second line. So obviously you'd probably put Huberdeau on the first line and keep that, Barkov, Huberdeau thing together. But they've got Bennett playing center, Reinhart on the wing, and I think that they're both kind of interchangeable between that on the second line. And below that, Patrick Hornqvist is on the third line, but, with him kind of getting a bit older, seems appropriate for the younger guys to pass him, and then it kind of gives him a bit more of a different role to play, a better role to play, maybe more suited to his play style.
Yeah. So I don't know, they seem kind of like on par with where they were. Florida seems to be kind of jumping around in the standings all over the place. So like they could be really good or they could be really bad. I guess it depends on goaltending.
I think they're gonna build off of last season. I think that was kind of their breakout year, with a lot of their best players just hitting like their mid-20s, their prime years. They've been able to keep so much of their roster together, and they just have a handful of younger players just starting to make their way up with like Anton Lundell, Owen Tippett. They're breaking out, and that first pairing of potential first pairing of Ekblad and Weegar. With the season that Weegar had, and how he jumped up and played such a big role in that team at the end of last season. That's an elite shutdown pair right there.
Yeah, Uyghur's on one of the best contracts in the league right now too.
Yeah, he's got a couple more seasons
at $3.25 billion. Like that's insane. We should mention too that they traded out Anton Strawman, so they bought a little bit of cap space for themselves to, keep all the guys and to offer Reinhart, I don't know, 5.5, 6, or whatever they're going to pay him. It's hard to see him making more than Huberdeau or Barkov, but they have a little bit of space. So see what they do there. But yeah, I mean, I think they'll still be a playoff team. It's just like they do jump around a bit in the standings, so I don't know where they'll end up. But on paper, it seems to be pretty much the same team. And then I guess next up here is the Montreal Canadiens, and this is a team which I think is going to be a lot worse and probably not get to the Stanley Cup Finals.
So much worse. They likely won't even make the playoffs.
Yeah.
That's going to ultimately be my projection, is that they're going to have to miss the playoffs. There's no way they can mimic what they had last season with what they're losing and the division that they're being stuck in again.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, like Shea Weber looks like he's done for sure next season, but maybe his career. Paul Byron is also having surgery and is out for long term. Carey Price they said that he should be good to go after some unique choice of language during the expansion draft to not get him picked. They signed David Savard. They brought back Chris Weidman from the KHL. They lost Corey Perry, signed Cedric Paquette, re-signed some guys, and they brought in Mike Hoffman.
Yeah, so I think we both just made the same reaction of just that, like, kind of hands up, unsure face.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, I think, like, losing your number one D-man, the captain of your team for next team, like, it's not ideal, obviously. Yeah.
Luckily,
going into next season.
Luckily, they have Jeff Petrie, who is, basically a pseudo number one defenseman. He just kind of got stuck behind Weber, but, Petrie's going to be able to take on most of that load. But he's also 33, and, luckily his play style is fairly non-physical, I think, or not very damaging physical, so he should be able to hold out for a bit. But that's a drop-off compared to last year, because you bring in David Savard, who is a good shutdown guy, but he has absolutely no offense in his game. And Shea Weber has quite a bit of offense capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, like, the only thing I can see happening to this team is, like, they outscore their problems maybe with that whole, like, 3 second line sort of mentality, because they're going to have Jonathan Drouin back. They added Hoffman. They still got Toffoli.
And they're going to have Caulfield.
Josh Anderson. Yeah, they're going to have Caulfield. And Nick Suzuki, and if they re-sign Kotkaniemi here, he's an RFA. I'm kind of surprised that Carolina hasn't offer sheeted Kotkaniemi, by the way, because of Montreal offer sheeting Aho a couple years ago. But yeah, I mean, like, they might be able to just score a lot, maybe, but their D line makes me a little nervous just based on how it's missing Shea Weber.
Yeah, it's not that they have a bad defense. They still have a solid top six on their defense. It's just that drop off from where it was last year, because that's kind of one of the things that pushed them as far as they got, was having so many elite defensemen. Yeah,
and no shade on Savard, but he's not Shea Weber. So, they're gonna decline a bit, I think, and it was surprising they got to the finals at all, and I do not anticipate them making the NHL or the playoffs.
They're not even going to make the NHL next season.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that they're going to be, super competitive.
Yeah, they'll be a solid middle of the pack team. They're going to win some games just through that same determination, work ethic mentality that they had. But I mean, the other one that we forgot to mention is the loss of Philip Deneau.
Yeah.
So they kind of had that amazing line of, and probably Thomas Tatar as well, but they had that line of Gallagher, Deneau, and Tatar that did so well together for quite a while, and now they just have Gallagher.
Yeah, I mean, the loss of Deneau, it's just huge. That ubiquitous, centerman that can play any end of the ice and just, win your face off. And, that
the guy who's like a
responsible guy.
Selke caliber guy, right?
Yeah, we'd be totally remiss if we didn't mention that loss. That's pretty huge. And, losing him really, really sucks for sure.
They brought in some depth guys, but none of them are going to be able to really replace that defensive side of the game that Deneau brought.
Mm-hmm, definitely. All right, well, I guess we'll move on to, a team not very far physically, the Ottawa Senators. And the Senators had a pretty good, end to the season. They were playing, really good. A lot of their young players.
That's the big point. They didn't finish last in the division.
Yeah, I mean, they had, that one road trip or whatever when they came out west in Canada, and they just lost a bunch of games, and they lost what was it, against Edmonton or whatever. They lost every game, and
yeah, they lost all 9 games versus Edmonton, and basically that was the thing that kept them at the bottom of the standings, because they were fairly average, slightly below average against everyone else.
Yeah, and they kind of had a bit of a mini turnaround. They just looked like they were hard to play against. Even though they were a bottom team, they were hard to beat.
They were energy. They weren't the greatest. They weren't the strongest roster, the most skilled at the time. But it was all of the energy that they had, that they were just taking control of games through just that energetic play, the controlling the pace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're going to look to build on that and to still be a young, fast team, and a skating team, as everyone made fun of with Pierre Dorian. But look at it now. They do skate, and they traded out Deneau, which I think is great. It wasn't a fit. The guy had 11 points or something like that. Something dumb. He had one goal.
He couldn't find his place with that roster, and I mean that's fair. They didn't really have a whole lot to surround him with.
Yeah, and they've just. I don't think they've been particularly super busy here in the off season.
No, I mean, their signings since the 20th of July. I mean, they Delzato, Andrew Agazzino, Pontus Aberg, Cole Sherwood, Dylan Hetherington, and Victor Mete. And how many of those are re-signings, right?
Yeah.
So they're not really doing a whole lot, which is fine, because they're kind of turning a point in the rebuild where they're just filling the holes in the roster from within.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at their blue line, they've it's not bad. It's not too bad.
They're actually at a point of surplus on the blue line, where they could actually trade some of these guys away for forwards to help solidify.
Yeah, and I think I think a guy like Michael Delzato, he had a really good season with Columbus. He was playing a lot of minutes. He actually did pretty good. That might be a guy that they can flip. He's on a 2-year deal here, $2 million. If he has an okay season, they could flip him.
Yep.
And then Artem Zub, actually, he was good for them.
That's a name that I was just thinking of, because he kind of skyrocketed up the depth chart last season. He had a great season for them. He might be someone that they see as expendable when they have Jacob Bernard Docker and Eric Brandstrom on their way up as well, giving them more ice time. Because I also believe I saw that they intend for Victor Mete to be a top 4 guy.
Wow.
So there's going to be some competition in there for these spots, and they're probably going to find some expendable players that they're going to end up flipping very soon.
Yeah, and I think that's a good and they also re-signed their coach, right? The mob boss guy,
DJ Smith.
DJ Smith. And having all of these young players and having this depth, and it could really build a good culture of competition internally, of having the best guy out there. You did really good in that game or whatever. We're going to keep you in the lineup, and your spot's never safe. You got to keep battling and keep battling and keep battling, and that could be really positive for them. And so I think they could be a bit of a dark horse to make playoffs. It's going to be tough in this division, but, depending on how they start, they could be kind of surprising. They had a lot of really, really good rookies. Tim Stützle's going to look to build on his season. Josh Norris as well. Brady Tkachuk is he's the type of player you want to build a team around, and him and Shabbat, they're just such a good combo. And
that's so important for them at the the earlier stages of this rebuild to get a franchise player to build around. I'll call him a franchise player in Brady Tkachuk just because he's kind of everything you want out of your the face of the team. Contributes offensively on the ice. He's physically engaged. He wants to be engaged. He wants to lead. And by all accounts, he's just a great person off the ice and for, in the locker room to build that culture around. And to have, Thomas Chabot's probably going to be in the Norris contention right away. And to have someone like him who's going to be entering his prime years as the team starts to skyrocket up the standings, that's going to be amazing to be able to do that and not have to worry about your defense.
Yeah, Thomas Chabot is somebody I wanted to talk to you about. Just how does his contract look compared to, Seth Jones and Werenski? They signed him for an 8-year, $8 million per contract.
I think it looks damn good right
2019. Now. But yeah, that looks. If the going rate for a defenseman is $9+ million right now, that's crazy. They were smart to lock that kid down because he's gonna be their workhorse. So it looks a lot better than maybe when he signed it. Now, just kind of aging well, just because of how the market is going. But he's their guy. So they did well there. But yeah, I think Ottawa, they don't really need to do anything. They kind of traded out the guy that wasn't a good fit. They brought in, some depth guys who can, perhaps put a little bit of a fight in for, some roster spots. But, they really just kind of got to sign 2 guys, Drake Batherson and Brady Tkachuk, and then they're set.
Yeah,
so.
And you're totally right. Sometimes the best offseason is a quiet one. And I feel like the state that Ottawa's in, the focus is just on building that internal team first. And then eventually you'll start being able to fill the holes from elsewhere. So this year, best plan, best case scenario is to have that quiet off season, and probably over the next couple of seasons, the next couple of off seasons is when they'll start being able to be more active. Yeah. And this of course is all assuming that Melnyk is going to pay for the rebuild.
That's a good point. Are they going to go to the cap ceiling, or are they going to go to the floor again? We'll see. I've always had a soft spot for the Ottawa Senators, and I really do hope that they, emerge from, kind of like the basement or mediocrity. After that absolute horror show after they were so close to making the finals with Erik Karlsson, and then just what their fans have been through. It's just so hard. And I know we talked about Buffalo earlier in this episode, but I'm a Canadian, and I'll always be a Canadian at heart, and just I've got a softer spot for Ottawa just because it's I want to see them do well. But Buffalo, I want to see them do well too, but it's just not quite as near and dear to my heart. So anyway, I guess we'll move on to the Stanley Cup champs here, Tampa Bay. They lost a whole line of forwards. They lost Yanni Gourde to expansion. They lost Blake Coleman. He is going to be playing in Calgary, and they lost Barclay Goodrow, who signed a great deal for him with the New York Rangers, and the Rangers are doing some interesting stuff. We'll talk about them when we talk about the Metro. And then they lost David Savard, and they brought in Brian Elliott to back up Vasilevsky. And then they brought in Brent Seabrook's contract, so they're still doing some interesting injured reserve stuff.
They brought in Ben Seabrook to occupy the long-term injured reserve.
Exactly. And then they also brought in Corey Perry. I've seen this joke a million times about Perry now. It's if you can't beat him, join him, right?
Yeah, it screams Marian Hossa to me. You lose the finals twice to this, losing the finals twice and then sign with the team sign with the team in the third season and then you win it. So are we going to see the Tampa three-peat or?
Yeah, it's I I like this, but it doesn't fit with Corey Perry's redemption arc for me. He's going back to being the bad guy here, but I love it for him. Like, it's awesome for him, and I bet like I think I saw like some rumor that like Kucherov was like in the handshake line, like you got to sign here or something like that, and it was like, like just a guy they played against like 2 years in a row, and there was times in Montreal in that Montreal series where he was like one of their best players, and he was one of the best players for Dallas too, and it's like yeah, they've seen a lot of him, and for him to go there, it just shows that the coaching staff, the general manager, all the players respect him, and we're like, we want to play with that guy, if only for the reason that we don't have to play against him in the finals again, and get like cross-checked and slashed and whatever. Get him on our team, and if he's not playing, then we don't have to worry about playing against Corey Perry. And then they also brought in Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, I guess I should mention too. So another bottom six guy, but they didn't really need to do a whole lot again. They re-signed Braden Point.
I think that Point contract is the main focal point of their offseason. Getting Braden Point for 8 years at $9.5 million per season is an absolute steal. I think this, Point is at times, a top 5 player in the league. He's easily hovering around top 10, and to have him for that price for long term is just fantastic, because he can do everything. He's a proven playoff performer. He goes on these goal streaks, both of the last 2 playoffs. Just a clutch player. You mentioned they lost a lot of front-end talent over the offseason. They've got some big holes to fill, and they're really going to be looking at guys like Alex Barré-Boulet and Ross Colton to jump up farther in the lineup. Someone that I had seen a lot of interesting talk about is Matthew Joseph, that he's kind of primed for a bit of a breakout season, and it'd be interesting to see if he gets a shot farther up in the lineup. So a couple of years back, he had 26 points in 70 games in his rookie season. He hasn't hit that quite yet, but it's also been shortened seasons and stuff, so it's hard to really get to that point. But with the losses that they've had up front, then it might give more of the younger players a chance to break in and find a new role on the team.
Yeah, and Matthew Joseph is a guy that when Alex Killorn was out in the finals with his broken leg or whatever he had, Joseph came in, or he stepped up, I guess, in the lineup and did really well. And so, yeah, I think, I'm not sure if Yzerman's hands are still on some of these players, like Ross Colton and Matthew Joseph or whatever, but, it's just some of these players that weren't rushed and, are kind of now breaking in. Even Alex Barré-Boulet, like the same sort of thing, right? Like a bit older when they're coming in, and I think it was Ross Colton scored his first shift or something in the NHL. It's like,
yeah, he had
it's
he had a really hot start where he scored a whole bunch at once pretty quickly, and got his name on some people's radars. And I think he actually he scored the cup winning goal, right?
I think so.
I think that was him.
Yeah. So they're just they're the cup winner or a cup defender team. They're still going to be a favorite to win.
Yeah, even with the losses, I mean, their top 6 is bar none, the best in the league, I have to say, where they've got 2, their first line best in the league, second line probably best in the league when it's all healthy. Even their depth looks fine, even with the loss of Gore, the loss of Coleman, the loss of Gaudreau, they all look totally fine, and nothing looks really out of place. Yeah,
I think they'll be just fine. Their top end players are just so good, and Victor Hedman, talked about this about some of the good contract of Mackenzie Weegar, and then we're talking about defenseman contracts in particular. Victor Hedman's got to be one of the top 3 good contracts in the league.
Oh yeah, I mean $7.875 million. He's still signed until 2024-25. And this, Hedman is arguably
top 5, top 3 defenseman in the league.
I'd argue he put him as the best defenseman in the league. He's absolutely in that discussion. He's making less than 5
Seth
to 10
Jones.
other guys.
Yeah.
Doughty, Carlson, Jones, Hamilton, soon to be Darnell Nurse.
yeah, and like you need guys to take, not at like a discount. Might not have been a discount when he signed it, but it's like,
Yeah. I guess that's the other thing we have to factor in is that when he signed that a few years ago, there was probably a higher point. It's probably the equivalent of what, the 9.5 that the guys are taking now.
Yeah. So it's aged, it just is aged so well.
Yeah.
It just allows them a bit more flexibility to bring in other guys, and that's huge.
Yeah.
If he was making $10 million, like, I know we joke about them fucking around with the cap and stuff, but if he was at $10 million, like, they might not have had like Blake Coleman, or they might not have had Yanni Gourde.
Well, they would have
able to re-sign him or something like that.
They would have had to buy out, actually buy out Tyler Johnson last year instead of just hold on to him for another year and trade him this offseason.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think they're still going to be, battling. I think probably one other team here for first place in the division, but they're going to be a playoff team again for sure. And then finally, everyone's favorite, Toronto Maple Leafs. So they kind of did this weird switch players with Boston thing.
They did do that for a few guys,
and it wasn't trades. It was just, we're going to sign the guy that's leaving your team, and you're going to sign the guy that's leaving our team. And so they brought in Nick Ritchie, Andre Kasha, and they also signed a couple guys who weren't from the Bruins. Michael Bunting, who's a guy that kind of, sharpened his teeth in Arizona last season and made a bit of a name for himself, scoring a few goals on a really good contract. They signed Curtis Gabriel, so they got a bit more, someone who can fight. And I think Curtis Gabriel has a lot of like positive locker room and
he's huge
community kind of guy too.
Yeah, Curtis Gabriel is huge in working on the social side of hockey and the inclusivity of hockey on outside of the rink, I guess. So to bring him into Toronto, like, I feel like that's a good move for the organization, especially if they can kind of empower him to do what he does and just help expand the game of hockey and help fix the toxic culture around it.
Yeah, for sure. They're bringing Spezza back. I think he signed another 1-year deal, or maybe he's on a second year. I think Wayne Drain is staying around.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, not like a lot of major changes for them.
A lot of swapping in the bottom six, I feel.
Yeah.
It's a lot of guys who are just going to be competing for bottom six spots just to give them some more forward depth. I mean, Andre Kasha and Michael Bunting, I like those signings. Kasha because it's a bit of a risky one because the guy just cannot stay healthy, but when he is good. Michael Bunting, I think, is just a low risk. Like, they got him for $950K for 2 seasons. It's very low risk on a guy who had a massive breakout through the middle half of last season. And, that being able to provide some hopeful depth scoring, something beyond the big few players at the top.
Yeah. Yeah, and they also brought in David Kampf, who was playing with Chicago, bottom six kind of guy. So yeah, they kind of, it seems like Dubas kind of does this where he just adds a lot of depth, changes the little things, because, they got so much locked up in the high-end guys.
Yeah.
Change the little things.
The nice thing is that their defense is going to be able to stay mostly the same. They were able to retain most of those guys. They're just going to be able to hopefully give, Sandin a full-time job in the lineup and, start bringing him into the NHL more regularly. Hopefully his game's ready for it, because I know there were some questions around that and his readiness or certain aspects of his game. But the big move for them is going to be in net, where they let Freddie Anderson walk.
No. The big move for them is that they're not bringing Jumbo Joe back.
I'm sorry, I completely neglected to remember that one.
Yeah, but no, go ahead. Yeah, it's the net.
Yeah, the big move for them was in the net. So they let Freddie Anderson walk. Another one of those, we'll sign your player, you sign ours type things with Carolina. Freddie Anderson left, went and signed in Carolina, and Toronto signed Peter Mrazek. So they got him for 3 years at $3.8 million per season, which I think is a fantastic contract for him. Or for the team, pardon me. Maybe not for him, because he put up solid numbers in Carolina last couple of years. he didn't play a whole lot. I think he gets hurt quite a bit. But the hope is probably for Jack Campbell to, be a main, 1B kind of guy who can fill in, because he had an excellent finally breaking in and staying in an NHL lineup after taking over, giving him some stability in net at the end of last year. But Mrazek and Campbell as 1A, 1B is probably going to be totally fine.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like about as good as, Anderson was, because Anderson also had, some injury problems last year. So even if Mrazek gets a little dinged up, it's like that's happened to them before. At least they got Campbell now, who can, go in and go on a crazy win streak. I don't know if that's going to happen again, but as long as he can play competently. His
performance might be overrated by the incredible streak he had compared to what he would be at a baseline level. But
yeah, but I think that kind of like Tampa, Toronto didn't have to mess with it too much here. They brought in some guys where they needed to replace guys that they weren't going to bring back, and try and bring some guys who fit the system in a bit better. Can't really do a whole lot when you got like 30 plus million tied up in 3 guys. So it's you got to tweak the little things unless you're going to go crazy and trade out Mitch Marner like the rumor was at the end of the season. So I think that they'll be in contention for first or second in the division. So they didn't really get better, they didn't really get worse, but they stayed around the same.
Yeah. It's at this point, this team is ready to take the next step into contention level, but it's just a matter of finding that clutch play.
Yeah,
that intangible clutch aspect of the game that they just keep seeming to collapse in the playoffs. It's got to find somewhere. They just have to find that kind of playoff work ethic that's going to push them to the next level. They still were missing that, and it might just be another couple of years while the core kind of figures it out on their own. That wraps things up for this time here on Clappercast. Make sure you rate and review this episode and toss a follow or subscribe our way. For more content, you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Clappercast Media or on Twitter at Clappercast. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back next week with more hockey talk.